Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, October 27th, so I guess that's Halloween or close enough to Halloween. It seems like everybody's treating today like Halloween, which is the case I guess pretty much for any Friday around that time. Although Halloween definitely doesn't really affect people anywhere as much as it once did many decades ago, where people actually did trick or treat and go door to door. Nowadays you really have to go out of your way to even see children or adults dressed up celebrating Halloween, and if you want to avoid it, all you really have to do is live your normal life, or at the very most make sure you turn off your front door lights and stay indoors, and you probably don't even have to do that much, really. When I launched Yu-Gi-Oh! Today, once again we had an update, so that the whole idea of them using Steam to update everything and not having to download extra things like a mobile game, since the mobile version of this game does have a real logical reason why it would want to warn you before you started downloading data. It's fine to play a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! On a limited mobile data plan, but you definitely want to be on Wi-Fi when the updates come. But it makes no sense on the PC version of it. But they still have yet to really address that. The downloads maybe got smaller, like it really was only 3 or 4 megabytes that it asked to download, but that's still quite a bit if you just want to jump into the game. Apparently we have a new selection pack, and we have a new secret pack. Well, no, new selection pack is coming the 29th, and so is the secret pack, and stage 2 of the Duels Cup has begun, and let's see, a slight update to the Forbidden Limited is happening on October 30th. All kind of important news, still being depicted very terribly in just such a way that you have, like most games, very much a lot of visual communication happening. Pictures, that's what gamers want to see. We really don't want to read as much. And then you have big walls of text with the updates, and it's just disconnecting. Really don't even have that many of these packs to open. We did get 3 new cards here, some of which I would have sworn I already owned, but apparently not. Alright, so I don't think we have anything new on the solo mode. Let's just scroll way down to the bottom and see where we are in solo mode. I think those have been around for a while. Probably should just cool it on doing the solo modes for like 6 months. Okay, so they said stage 2 has started, and I guess that pretty much means that the good players have just moved on to stage 2, whereas people who didn't play enough, like me, or people who weren't good enough, like me, now still just have to struggle, maybe amongst a lower subset of competitors. Maybe it'll be a little bit easier, but it seems like we have to get to level 20 before you could even start to do stage 2, and maybe it's too late. Yeah, you have a tool temp. I can't defeat strong opponents. In that case, revive your deck, build a new deck. Which, yeah, that's something that any 25-year-old collectible card game is going to struggle with, that Yu-Gi-Oh! In particular I think struggles with, in that this is not a game where you can just build a random deck and it will have enough wildness and randomness into it. I'm no expert on every single collectible card game out there, but it feels to me like there should be a system, and this would be an interesting idea if it's never been done before, of more randomness the older a card gets. The idea that each card might represent a concept or a character, and with each year that character grows and becomes stronger and maybe even crazier or random, would be an interesting idea, because then that could be a case where if you're going to retroactively do it, say in Yu-Gi-Oh, you could say that every card has a date, a release date on it, which would be helpful anyways, they have release dates on them, and a year after the release date they can take advantage of their effects, or at least a level 1 effect. I honestly would want to see a level 1, level 2, and level 3 effect happen here. But in its original form, the card should just be treated like a normal card almost, and just only have attack and defense. Yeah, that would certainly be crazy. But it would bring back more value to cards. And yes, 3 years even is more than I think most collectible card game players will dip their toes into any card game, unless it becomes a major success. Then they'll stick around forever. But to have a 3-year plan and look that far into the future would be interesting, to say the least. And almost certainly there are other ways to add randomness to things, but I think that would be one way to certainly say, hey, these older cards that are not playable anymore, which, yeah, in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's about 10,000 cards, and I would say 9,000 of them are not playable. In Magic the Gathering, I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers are even higher. And in particular in Magic the Gathering's case, official tournament play, almost none of the cards are playable, because you can really only play the rolling 4 releases. In Magic the Gathering. As it stands, telling a player that they're sort of struggling, that they should just rebuild their deck, is not terrible advice, but it's not very helpful advice. Like, it's not like there's a deck sharing feature in this game. It's not like there's a deck suggestion feature in the game. How much do I want this guy to draw? I'll do one more here. So So now he's got 5 cards, decent chance of, or 6 cards now, decent chance of him being able to play something, but also a decent chance that Zeus can just defeat him. Nope, that didn't work the way I would want. So he's killed my character, he's monster reborning his character. For the accountability section today, I'll keep it short. I'm still working heavily on the programming, just thinking a lot, learning a lot. A lot of it mostly is still just HTML, like getting the website, the tiny little website that is just 2 pages to look correct. And starting to do some debugging and testing there, getting when you submit information in the website that it actually takes that information and saves it in a file and doesn't just do nothing with the information as far as passwords. The software there with Wi-Fi Manager is way further than I would ever be, but certainly it is also not as far as I would like it to be. In particular, unless one experiment I tried proves to be true, it puts the Wi-Fi connection as its own separate page, and then from the other perimeter settings, which means when you click and connect to a Wi-Fi, it saves and then basically tries to reset the whole thing and say, well, I've got the Wi-Fi information, that's all I've been designed to collect, so I'm good there, instead of waiting or pushing you to the second page to say, hey, also these extra perimeters, these extra bits of information that my code specifically needs are also important. And just having it on 2 pages is confusing in general. To the point where I'm gonna have to, at the moment, I have it, and I probably will keep it this way, I have it set in such a way that you're entering a Wi-Fi SSID and password, but it's not going through the normal system. It's just adding a secondary field asking for that information, so it's all in one place and all in one page. And then I did a lot of HTML to limit what you can put in an input field, minimum length, maximum length, just what kind of patterns you're looking for. There's some regular expressions I found online that will check to see if it's a IP4 internet address, 0.0.0.0 to 255.255.255.255. I don't think I'm gonna win here. I should just end the turn quickly and save myself time. And yeah, some regular expressions to check if the port number is somewhere between 0 and 65,535, which is the maximum port number. Although in all fairness, it very possibly should be 1024 to 65,535, because there is actually rules in place to not use any of the ports below 1024. Those are ports that are already pre-assigned for other things. Port 80 is what you connect to when you're connecting to an HTTP website, and port 443 I believe is HTTPS, stuff like that. And those are just like so standardized port numbers, although inherently it's probably better not to use the standard port numbers even in those cases. Well, HTTP and HTTPS depends on whether you want other people to see it or not. I struggled for a long time on a very stupid mistake of just having the math wrong, to get the light to flash on the thing in its configuration emergency mode. Like if you tell it to turn the light on, then wait, then turn the light off, it will stop the whole program from processing, because there's asynchronous functions happening here, and you would be effectively blocking the other asynchronous functions. So instead I had to make just a number and count the number up by 1 every time a loop goes in a circle, and then you take a general idea of how long each loop is going to take, since it is consistently going to be 240 megahertz unless I change its CPU process power. It will always be that same speed, or something consistent at least. But what I was doing is I was counting the number upward and then testing for the number to be less than. So when the number was less than 10, the light would be on. Well, that would mean that it would be less than 10 for 10 loops, and then it would be off for 20 loops, and then off for another 20 loops, or something like that. Like the math was off. Like I kind of had to put everything backwards, and because it was if else statements, so it was only testing one thing after one thing failed. Which, honestly, I probably should just change that to a switch case, because it will read better. I'm not sure 100% that switch cases exist in Arduino C though. I don't tend to lean on them heavily. Most of the time you don't use a switch case, even if you should be using a switch case. And by switch case I don't mean Nintendo Switch carrying case, I mean a C function called switch that tests for multiple things. Where you'll say like switch variable A, and if A is equal to the letter Z, it'll do one thing. You would say case equal Z or case Z, do this one thing. Or if it equals something completely different, if it equals C, you'll have a case C. But yeah, that's basically all I did yesterday, amongst just still being really slow, and definitely got the feeling yesterday too that I'm just not making as much progress, and I'm losing momentum in my programming, which I don't want that to happen. And it mostly was, most of yesterday was just focused on getting the code back to compiling state and getting everything to work. It slows down the whole process, certainly a lot when you're testing a captive portal, and that means you with every upload and reset, you're having to, with my phone, reconnect it to the captive portal. So it's a Wi-Fi handshake setup. It adds a few more steps. Compiling for any computer program is still incredibly slow. Inherently, if you're a programmer, this is the main reason why you always need more powerful computers, is because compile times never get better, they only get worse. Let's see. With that, we'll activate that one. And go through all this rigmarole. Inherently, I'm in this weird position where I still haven't gotten back to the WebSocket OBS part of the code, the meat of the code, more difficult stuff. So had I spent the past few days instead focusing on that, that would have been that would have been weird. Or it would have been a case where now I would be hitting the struggle part more, and I think I made the right decision to deal with the encoded handshake and the WebSocket code first. Do the harder parts first, so I can get a general idea if the code would work at all. There's some danger, certainly, in having things flash. Not a lot. Almost every device that needs to depict that it's not connected to the Wi-Fi does flash at some rate, or by some amount. But I could see there being some problems in that, one, the flashing would flash too much and possibly even hurt the circuitry or just cause seizure-inducing flashes. So I definitely want to try and get the timing to be not too fast. That being said, if the flashing is too slow, if it's more than 2 or 3 seconds, it's very possible that people would look at the sign would be on for 2 or 3 seconds, and then they would leave. Inherently with the on-air sign, though, that is also the bigger problem, is people would look at the sign and think the sign is either on or off when it wasn't, or stop looking at the sign altogether. Yeah. In reality, on-air signs aren't as good as they really should be, and they're honestly should be closer to door locks, electric door locks on doors in the recording booth. Which, yeah, you see those weirdly, like Walmart automotive sections. There's always this electric door lock, as far as every one I've ever been to. Where you have to be buzzed in or buzzed out. There is also a slight concern that you wouldn't want the on-air light to start flashing and look like a fire exit sign. I have no idea if fire exit signs flash. I don't believe they do. even in the case of a fire. But I could see a smoke-filled room, and then it being confused as making a entrance to like a recording booth, looking like an exit towards the building. And there really is no good way to solve that. Inherently, if there was like a major disaster, a major fire or something like that, and the Wi-Fi went out, it's gonna start flashing. Interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody play this before. And I don't think it's worked well for him. I guess the question is, can I... Oh, he's doing this on purpose so that he can bring something out of the graveyard, I think. Or he's doing this on purpose so that he can create a situation where I can't play. Which he may have me there. He may just have me here. These tokens won't end up in the graveyard, so they don't really help me much. And you know, really can't do anything else, so just end the turn there. See, and this here is supposed to be the better visual version with the white text and the shininess on it of this card. But in every way, to my eye, this default version of the card looks way better than this does. The extra shininess in a digital format just doesn't show off well. I got a book that was talking about the X-Men trading cards from the 80s, and it took me forever to get through that first introduction. I would say skip the introduction and just look at the pages that show the pictures. Then it's super easy because each page is literally just a picture of a card. And so there's maybe a sentence or two on the background, on the back worth reading of each card, but that's it. It's probably a 600-page book that has about 20 pages worth of text in it. But it is very text heavy with like 2 or 3 introductions at the very beginning. But what I found fairly annoying with it was the fact that there's let's see what this does. There were hologram cards that they were talking about and showing, but they didn't really bother to put the hologram effect on the picture, so the hologram cards just look terrible. Okay. So So this guy's just playing for defense. Do I have any cards whatsoever that would help or work with that? Like, it feels to me like... Oh, so there was some other trick there. Well, that was certainly tricky. You don't get that very often in Yu-Gi-Oh! You don't get something fairly interesting or different happening. Alright, let's start going over the video game news. Sony has confirmed in this update from Video Games Chronicle that Connie Booth has left Sony, but they haven't stated a reason, and they said her duties are just going to be spread amongst other people, which almost certainly implies to me that they weren't expecting it in the long run to get rid of her. So I think she quit would be at least that would be the assumption to take first and foremost. It's like, because if you had planned to lay her off in any way, you probably at that high of level would have had pre-scripted explanations or statements to make, and not taken 2 days to respond in any way. And you would have had something more to say there. Now, it might be she just quit randomly. It might be she quit because she was being harassed and she's going to sue the company. It might be anything between that. There is a definite possibility that Jim Ryan is sneakily moving over to a new company or starting his own company, and he's taking the talent that he wants with him, stealing talent, and that there might be a Sony lawsuit that happens where they claim he did something, is doing something wrong. Any and everything of that could be the case. I wouldn't be surprised if it actually comes out that Connie Booth and Jim Ryan maybe even have a personal relationship, and they're both quitting Sony and going to announce that they've at some point become officially a couple. Although inherently at those high levels you tend to only really promote people that have that family already. It is a weird catch-22 because corporations really would like you to be a friendless, familyless loser that has nobody to lean on for emotional support, or nobody else to focus on, or financial support, or anything like that. They'd like you to be 100% about your job, but that totally, as a concept, gets dropped as soon as they start thinking about managers, because they want the managers to look as normal and relatable as possible. And if every CEO out there was outwardly appearing as job obsessed as they really are a lot of times, it just doesn't come off as relatable. I think Bill Gates is probably the best example of that, in that Bill Gates almost certainly should be this incel nerd character, although the phrase incel wouldn't really have applied to him since that wasn't invented until much later. And yet, through, I think, probably power and money, he was even able to score a wife through Microsoft itself. You get the whole Elon Musk element there too. Like, Elon Musk is married and has kids, but he still comes off as a sad virgin loser as a character, even though we know he literally has kids. And Elon Musk inherently being not media trained, not relatable, hurts him severely, whereas almost every other CEO or high-level manager has figured out that they have to play a role. And that's what a lot of management is you're just pretending to be somebody else. You're playing a role to represent a company, to act like you know what you're talking about, to get an air of authority that you very likely don't actually deserve, to convince people that you are in a position of authority when you really shouldn't be. And ironically, a lot of middle management are way above their heads in what they pretend to be and how much authority and decision making they can really make, when in reality they are really just puppets for much higher managers. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com has this Games for Gaza bundle being launched to aid Palestinian relief. Players can spend $10 to receive arcade spirits, beam saber, and more in a bundle with proceeds going to humanitarian aid for Palestinians. So it took a while. There is honestly not been, I think, a lot of aid even allowed inward to Gaza. So Israel is effectively blocking and blockading it. Which, yeah. This link here, it's not really taking me to, didn't take me to the games bundle. Let's see, Games for Gaza. Did I click on the wrong thing? Yeah, I did. So it's not a humble bundle, noticeably, and it's a niche.io bundle. Let's see. And it's already raised its $15,000 goal. The problem with this, though, is you have to be fairly hopeful that this money is actually going where it claims to go, and medical aid for Palestinians actually is a legitimate organization. There's a lot of research you should probably do before you give to any charity. But yeah, it definitely still feels like most companies don't want to get in the middle of this. Yeah, and most companies here, like, I recognize Arcade Spirits, but the rest of these feel like very small games, and they're from developers I don't really recognize. Maybe Microsoft Games is somewhat bigger. I'd say both sides really need to do better on their PR as far as getting charitable aid and support. I mean, it's just so easy to not like either Palestine, Israel's, or anybody else's side on the Middle East conflict war going on for thousands upon thousands of years now. Yep. There's a longer list than I thought of games here. Almost all of these are just small itch.io games for $10, which is actually just way too expensive for what you're getting compared to compared to what a Humble Bundle would be. You're getting, it said 7 Steam keys for $10. So you're nearly paying $1 just for $1 each for games that you probably wouldn't want to play. A lot of these have names like FTL that's not the FTL you'd think of, and are intentionally games trying to create name confusion. If anything, I think this also highlights the state of how I've always imagined and assumed itch.io was, is that you would just have almost 100% garbage on itch.io, and that has always been the part of my frustration when you see like non-garbage games. Well, it's part of my frustration when you see garbage games on Steam and Steam Direct in general happening, because itch.io has always felt like it was the place to go for small indie projects and cheap, smaller garbage games, for lack of a better way of describing it. Like a 5-minute game on itch.io seems fine, particularly if it's free on itch.io, but a 5-minute game on Steam seems completely unacceptable, because I just don't think of itch.io as being a professional storefront that you sell professional products for. It is effectively a junk store, not a like high-class storefront, not even a Walmart supermarket equivalent. If we look at itch.io's front page, which honestly I've never even looked at it, yeah, you would think if there was quality games on here, they would be advertised right here at the front, and very quickly you're having pretty terrible game dev resources, the kind of RPG Maker sprites that being sold, which, yeah, itch.io seems to be targeting very highly the people who think they can make games or want to make games, but are going about it completely the wrong way. And that is something I would say also public education is failing at. Like, there should be an introduction to computer programming video game development in every public school, probably at the 6th or 7th grade level, if not 4th or 5th. Something that just tells people, hey, here is the system and here's the software. But even in that case, if you are going to let's go to this top seller's point. If public schools were going to try to have a system, an education like that, they actually would cheat anyways. They would have the kids learn Scratch and pretend like the Scratch, like that's what they're doing right now at 5th and 6th grade, is they teach kids how to quote unquote make games with Scratch, which helps them in no way. And then they often make the argument, well, it teaches them the basic concepts, and basic concepts are nice and all, but they really are not that helpful when you're teaching kids a false reality that game development is going to be easy, and that you can use some language like Scratch, which is a visual Lego drag and drop block programming language, when you can't. It just doesn't make any sense there at all to confuse them. If you really want to teach the basic concepts of programming but don't want to teach programming, teach math, because inherently programming is math, and there's literally mathematical symbols that are functions. The big Roman looking E is actually a function and can directly be programmed like a function. or translated into a programming function. But yeah, teaching Python for programming is the bare minimum, in my opinion, that should be taught at 4th or 5th grade, and nothing really before then. Because even going from Python to C, C++, C#, or even Rust, if they do move in the direction of using Rust programming language, even that transition is going to be fairly rough. And I guess at this point, like webmastering HTML, while that should be taught at some level, it probably shouldn't be taught in public schools at all. It's just, we are far, far away from the idea that somebody's going to need or even want to make a web page, or that everybody's going to have a web page, which is what people thought. Unfortunately, really, because I kind of would like to see the internet have more people with their own individual websites instead of everything being on the top 5 websites. May have not hold this perfectly well. Yep. Apparently itch.io is now on YouTube, so you can watch YouTube videos of their games, which isn't a terrible idea. It's a little surprising Steam doesn't have a YouTube channel separate for that. But here's their top-selling games, of which they are only getting a result of 58,000, so there really aren't that many games anyways. Yeah. You have parodies of Frasier games, which may be copyright infringement as a top seller. You have a lot of what looks like very garbage games. Here's an AI Yandere Simulator, since the original game called Yandere Simulator is never going to be finished. Oh, speaking of other developers who are never going to finish anything they promise, American McGee basically started putting up personal videos on his YouTube channel, which I just think that's weird in general, to put up pictures of him and his kids. He really should just let the YouTube channel die, which in my mind I think is inherently a desire on his part to still be able to have celebrity at the very least, if not somehow monetize his channel even past this point now, where it has once again been proven that he just is not going to be able to make a new Alice game. Yep. It all comes off as very scammery-ish. But I'm not 100% sure what the scam is, if the scam isn't really just for popularity and celebrity. And that's generally the case, that you know somebody is trying to scam you, is that you just don't quite get the hook, you don't quite get the gimmick. If you understood the scam, you wouldn't fall for the scam effectively. But there is definitely some red flags where the narrative just keeps on continuing and going, and there's just always a new twist, and there's this intrigue to it, in which the story just continues no matter what. And there's also red flags when something is never that person's fault, and yet all these more than average horrible things keep happening to that person looking for sympathy. But honestly, it's kind of not even worth talking about American McGee. So, the bigger condemnation by far isn't that American McGee failed to create a new Alice game, which was obvious for the most part that wasn't going to happen. And there's probably a good way to excuse the fact that mainstream video game journalism pretty much ignored him and didn't cover any of his live streams or potential comments there, or his developer Bible. In his latest video, he straight up suggested that somebody just use his game development Bible and use AI art to copyright infringe on EA, which maybe that's his secret plan in the long run, is that he thinks he can just get somebody else to make the game for him, or even he is going to make the game using AI generated art, or claiming he's using AI generated art, and make the game under the premise that it isn't him that's making the game, so EA can't sue him, because there's uniquely an exclusivity contract under which he is held, in which he can't make a game called Alice, or even though Alice in Wonderland is in the public domain, or anything similar to that. Although inherently this has nothing to do with the Wizard of Oz game that was also supposed to be in development. He's totally stopped talking about that one too. Because I'm sure that was not really a project that he could finish either. Or I should have banished something else, I guess. Yeah. Continuing to scroll down here, though, on itch.io. Yeah, my general assumption seems to be 100% right. There's not even like one big element here. Like one big thing that would be a system seller equivalent. I feel like there was something about this game, Butterfly Soup, when it came out, but I think it came out on Steam a long time ago. But I kind of feel like there might have been some controversy around Butterfly Soup. EF Celeste. That's the first big game. Costume Quest. Okay. But everything else here really just screams garbage game. Things that I wouldn't even give the time of day to. And it's not like you're seeing a lot of adult games either, which that is certainly something that itch.io could try to sell itself under too, is that it could be the place where there's less censorship and more adult games allowed. Now inherently also you're not going to see a lot of Japanese games or particularly visual novels on itch.io because it's just not a big enough platform, and Japanese publishers are not going to go through that effort to publish a game on its own separate on a smaller platform when they're barely learning to even put games out in general on Steam and PC in general. Eventually, you might start to see a lot of Japanese developers go to itch.io if it made sense to. But why would it make sense? Yeah. It may just be a personal opinion, but I definitely get the feeling like you should be fairly exclusive when you first launch a storefront. Like, even if eventually you're going to devolve down to being Walmart and just selling anything as cheaply as possible, which in fairness, even Walmart has a certain level of quality to what you're purchasing. You're definitely not getting just cheap Chinese garbage like you get at Wish.com or Temu on Walmart or even Walmart.com. Although I imagine Walmart will eventually get down to that level. But to start with a somewhat exclusive, somewhat high quality product and bring in the audience and gain some confidence in your storefront and in the products you're selling, and to be able to actually stand behind your products, which is a concept that is quickly becoming extinct, is the right way to start a storefront. So in the case of itch.io, if I was making a storefront like itch.io, I would much prefer it to be closer to something like the Epic Games Store, where the Epic Games Store 2 allows pretty much anything in theory. It at least has a lot more of an air of having quality games. And that has always been in part the concern too with Steam, is that with Steam Direct, Steam would just lose a level of confidence in its storefront. Like, if tomorrow all AAA games stopped being released on Steam and Steam was 100% just getting Steam Direct garbage games, very quickly people would start to think about moving away from Steam. Now, most people have hundreds of games on their Steam storefront, so they may just stop playing games and continue playing their old games, but yeah. Trying to see if any of these cards did anything in the graveyard. It doesn't seem like they do. Anyways, that was a long side tangent on the Games for Gonza bundle. Yeah, 250 games and other creative works by 140 designers, none of which are important enough to mention, to the point where they're back by the third paragraph mentioning Inner Sloth and Work for Indies directly giving donations for a Palestinian relief fund, a different Palestinian relief fund. Yeah, nobody in the game industry in any way supporting Israel. Which, yeah, again, I would say both sides really, really bad at PR and just getting popularity there. Moving on to other topics, Video Games Chronicles. Video Games Chronic very possibly is a real website. Probably not a news site though. Video Games Chronicle says game industry mergers and acquisitions are expected to increase steadily over the next year. Sony, Take-Two, Tencent, and Savvy/Berkeley are predicted to be the most active deal makers. I'm not 100% sure I agree with this speculation. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a relatively calm year next year. The thing here, mostly from my vision, is that now that we're getting into the end of the year, if they don't close a deal by December 31st, they probably are just going to take it somewhat slow. So I wouldn't be surprised if the first 9-10 months of 2024 are fairly quiet around mergers. There probably are some discussions happening around mergers, but also there's a little bit less to be merged and acquired. You know, Sony, an example. If Jim Ryan, the guy in charge of Sony Interactive Entertainment, is leaving, he's not going to be involved really in merger talks or acquisition talks. So whoever the new guy is would be involved in that, or it's going to be Sony of Japan, the parent company, doing mergers, which I could see that happening, but I don't follow the other industries as far as Sony goes. Take-Two could be forced to merge or acquire places like Gearbox if Embracer Group is going to just, say, abandon Gearbox and lay off all the people. But on the other hand, I wouldn't be surprised if Gearbox does just get completely laid off and then Take-Two hires maybe a quarter of the staff without acquiring all of the assets. At a certain level, you have to think about what Gearbox is. Gearbox owns Duke Nukem, which may not really be that valuable. It almost certainly isn't that valuable. And they own a couple other failed games that they created. And that's kind of effectively it. Like, as far as intellectual property, valuable thing. Otherwise, what Gearbox owns is a couple of offices and office chairs and computers, and maybe movie rights to the Borderlands movie. But I bet 2K has movie rights to that also, since they own Borderlands in general. Yeah, and so when you're getting down to, you get Duke Nukem and you get some office chairs and some computers and you get some employees you don't really care about, well, why not just let Gearbox instead fail and just hire the employees that you do care about, and in bankruptcy buy Duke Nukem if you really want to own Duke Nukem. Forget about the office chairs and the computers. And inherently that assumes that Gearbox doesn't have any debt or other lenders that would make claims on the office chairs and computers and the IP of Duke Nukem. Because yeah, you definitely don't want to acquire Gearbox if they're millions and millions of dollars in debt and then you're just acquiring extra debt for no reason. Tencent inherently is going to do what Tencent does. Like, Tencent really can't even be considered a video game company at this point in my mind. It has to be considered an acquisitions company. So obviously I do suspect Tencent will continue to try to acquire things, although it may get harder and harder for Tencent to successfully acquire anything. Because there's just going to be fewer and fewer people willing to effectively sell out and be acquired by Tencent. Plus, you're getting competition of Middle Eastern countries also acquiring companies and pumping money into the development of companies, where Tencent was almost the exclusive Chinese company for several years there. And then Savvy Scopely, I don't even really know who that is, so it's real hard to predict whether they would acquire anything or not. Noticeably on this article, they're showing off the Activision Blizzard King acquisition by Microsoft as their thumbnail, which is slightly confusing when they're talking in the subheadline here of Sony, Take-Two, Tencent, and Savvy Scopely. Disney Dreamlight, according to Matsu, or Disney's Dreamlight Valley, I guess they got rid of the S, it's just Disney now, has launched December 5th alongside its first expansion and is no longer free to play. The Rift in Time showcase is set for November 1st. I guess it's been early access up until this point. It's really crazy that you would have something as free to play, although inherently it always did feel like Disney's Dreamlight Valley was crazy to try to be free to play anyways. It definitely came off like it was trying to be a Animal Crossing game with just like the craziest, I guess this might be the right move here, the craziest of monetization and stamina time waster elements to it, which was frankly a real shame, because it definitely came off to me like there should be a much bigger audience of Dreamlight Valley fans and adult Disney fans playing the game, and it just wasn't happening. Maybe we'll see that happen now more. You still kind of have a weirdness in that you can't play as a kid, avatar, while you're Disney adulting, running around interacting with all the Disney characters. I still never really saw anything that made it feel like it was a good game per se. Like there's like not a lot of mini games that they were highlighting, or a general gameplay mechanic. In Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley, you're usually farming, but if there is farming in Dreamlight Valley, I don't think they emphasize it enough. So I guess this is the price now. You pay $3,000. I mean, you pay $40, you get 8,000 moonstones. Or you get the Cozy Edition and you get some extra exclusives, and I think that's 1450 moonstones. Let's zoom in there. Yeah, 1450 moonstones versus 1500 for the next tier up, for $50. And yeah. There's a lot of extras that you're getting. Cozy Edition, I guess, is the physical edition, where this is a digital edition that is more expensive and even more of a thing. Okay. So banish this and destroy this card. And then, confusingly here, the expansion of Rift in Time is another $30. So the game is still way too expensive, because what they'd really like you to do is buy this. But since these exclusive perks only unlock, they'd also like you to buy this. And I'm not even sure if you really could buy the Cozy Edition physically, install that, then buy the Gold Edition digitally and upgrade to that. And then they want you to spend like another $30 on top of $70 for the expansion, because the Gold Edition doesn't seem to be like including a season pass for the first expansion. So it's just like way too expensive. And so when you start to think about, hey, do you really want Disney back into dealing with video game companies or acquiring video game companies? You only have to look as far as this pricing to see this is just not going to this pricing is just way too high. Reading this over, though, apparently even the early access game was not free to play, so this is a case of Gamatsu saying no longer free to play here, but down here they're saying they've never been free to play. That we made the decision to remain a paid game for the foreseeable future. This means we will not make it a transition to free-to-play game when we leave early access. Yeah. So let's just check. Let's just do a little research ourselves here and see what the price is on Disney's Dreamlight Valley. Yeah. Apparently it's always been pay. So Gamatsu's got the headline wrong there. It's always been a paid game. So which doesn't change much. It just means the game's always been too expensive. Even though it is on my wish list and it has been received very positively, I definitely feel like this is a game that should be closer to a free-to-play experience, or they've just got to figure out some other way of making it cheaper or making it better, one or the other. Yep. Because even in these screenshots you can see that the vast majority of the focus on these screenshots are just, you have this adult avatar with a kind of Pixar-esque modeling style, which looks fine, and you have dress up on the wardrobe and decorate on the furniture, and that seems like that's pretty much it. Like, here's a screenshot where your avatar character is really just a background character to a set. You have your character not even on screen. Here you have another set, which I don't even know what movie this is from. And then it's just back to decorating inside your house. This is, I think, your general hub area, and you get little mini games from like Goofy that would give you resources to do things, and you can see there's a little bit of farming here, but none of it really made a lot of sense. Yeah, and inherently I still feel like they just have dropped the ball by not having the ability to be a kid. Even if you wanted to have a cutscene at the very beginning of the game where you were a Disney adult, and then your Disney adult model got magically transformed into a Mickey Mouse level height of a childlike experience, that would be fine. This was a very early screenshot, and there's definitely some weirdness here that you have these like different colored pockets highlighting the butt of this character, and yet this character, I'm not even showing this, am I? Man, I'm doing that more and more. So you have a Mickey and Minnie pockets here, but you really are just highlighting the butt of this character, even though this character is wearing a backpack and Mickey Mouse ears, all of which really should have been just a kid, or at least Mickey Mouse height adult. Magically have Mickey turn them all to be that same height. Like the idea that the wizard is 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet shorter than a human adult doesn't help. So you're just inherently out of scale. See if we can win here. I think this will be our last game because I'm running out of momentum here. Yeah, I heavily suspect I A, won't get to diamond level in ranked, and B, won't get as far as I'd like to get in this Duelist Cup. Now, it's worth pointing out too that if you're going to do an Animal Crossing style game where you decorate and farm on PC, Dreamlight Valley may still be one of your best options if that's the kind of game you're really looking for. This guy's just taking forever. But they are coming up if you only care about dressing up. And if you perhaps want more dress up and less, what would be the best word to use? Less Disney, more high fashion. There is that high fashion dress up game that is coming out eventually. I'm gonna have to rush here. Was probably going to win anyways, but I think the dress-up game may have Nikkei in the name, but I'm not sure. It's not Nikkei Got Us a Victory mobile game, but it is the dress-up game that they're making a console version for is based on mobile games that are girly dress-up games. And yeah, Dreamlight Valley shouldn't be 100% girly, but if you're gonna have so much about it be dressing up, it probably should be a little bit more girly. So we've now dueled in the Duels Cup 20 times and accomplished then that one and that one. We haven't We'd still need to play quite a bit with spells and trap cards. We still would need 3 more duels in the next 2 days to do this, and 17 more duels to do this. Meanwhile, all the daily quests have been done, and the login's been done, and the Duel Live hasn't been done, obviously. That is putting us in a decent position with gems, and we're almost at level 100 on the Duel Pass. Speaking of potential scammers here, I'm still not 100% sure on Dan, the guy who runs Censored Gaming, but I feel like you can't prove anything, but this definitely sounds to me like drugs. Like he's potentially either not getting enough drugs or getting too many drugs, whether those are legal drugs or not drugs. On his main thing, he first puts out the speech as far as Vince McMahon of the WWE introducing the Attitude Era, and then in the middle of the night, what feels like a manic episode, he puts out this wall of text saying basically nothing, but recommitting once again to just trying to make as much censored gaming content as possible and not trying to control things. So more quantity, less quality potentially is what he's saying, but it's hard to really take anything from that. I'll always be the same person as a quote here, which definitely comes off as somebody who's not really thinking this through as far as a public statement should be. He's going to strap a keyboard to his wrist and microphone around his shoulders and come at things with this different approach, an open mind to do as much as I possibly can. Like, he definitely seems like he has every reason to be depressed for his situations, whether his situations are his own fault or not, or but as soon as this came out on his personal page, which noticeably he's, I guess, done a good job here of not really connecting to his personal page, he's immediately, like a minute later, putting out a video called Personal Update instead of Channel Update. The Channel Update basically just saying this for word. He just scripted it out and read it. The Personal Update says he was charged for a year of Duolingo and his bills are due, and he really is seemingly living paycheck to paycheck, which in all fairness, I'm not surprised that more YouTubers aren't constantly having to admit that they're broke and that they're living paycheck to paycheck. I definitely am not making any money on my YouTube channel, so at any point I could have to go and flip burgers at McDonald's or something if the need arose. Not that I particularly could actually flip burgers at McDonald's, but yeah, he got charged and tricked by Duolingo, which in all fairness, I could see Duolingo giving you a free trial and then it immediately connecting you to a year's subscription. But that really isn't a problem that you should run into too often. You should be aware of how things work as far as free trials, and you should be aware of how to dispute charges and reverse charges and say, no, I did not intend to agree to this, even if you accidentally did agree to it in some fine print and wall of text. But yeah, to make that a public thing and say, hey, here's yet another thing that I need help with and I'd like people to support me on Patreon with is crazy. And yeah, the fact that there are just constantly things that keep coming up although his living situation does seem to be fairly static at the moment, so he does sound like he found a place to live. But yeah, the person running Censored Gaming still really not doing as much as I think he should be doing. Like clearly somebody needs to make him the offer. Somebody very publicly needs to say, I'll make you an offer, I'll buy Censored Gaming from you. Like inherently, if I was a successful YouTuber, I'd say, I'll buy Censored Gaming from you and hire you as an employee, and all you have to do is write, and you'll get paid to write and research, which mostly this is just research more than even writing. But yeah. But how many big corporations, or secretly backed by big corporation YouTube channels, really want to deal with censorship and address censorship? That's the thing. You'd almost have to get somebody like Wikipedia, the founders, or to support you. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles is announcing something that I am very excited to announce, in that they are reorganizing their leadership with promotions for Sarah Bond and Matt Booty. Inherently, this is reorganizing to get ZeniMax to be a smaller, less bloated company. ZeniMax still technically exists, whereas it might make a lot of sense to just shutter ZeniMax and move all of the team into a Microsoft division. Sometimes this takes several steps, and you'll see ZeniMax change its name from ZeniMax to Microsoft ZeniMax or something like that. Egos get bruised, certainly, if you just completely shut down something called ZeniMax, if somebody there likes the name ZeniMax. Bond is going to be the president of Xbox, which, when you have a CEO of Microsoft Gaming, the president of Xbox is not really a title that makes as much sense. Like, it becomes questionable what the president is doing versus the CEO. Almost always when you have an effective president, they are also the CEO, or there is no CEO. I don't know if this isn't perhaps, I mean, this is the catch-22, and I guess I shouldn't even say it, is that when you see a minority of any sort made the president in such a tall ladder, is this for show, or did they really earn it? And it's incredibly unfair to the minority, who maybe worked very hard and did earn it, in that a lot of people are just going to judge a person by their appearance, which is the definition of racism or sexism, instead of researching their career and determining whether or not they are actually qualified for it. On the other hand, when you get to the high levels of presidents and CEO, their appearance is almost exclusively what you are hiring them for. Very notably here, you're not seeing the stereotypical nerd character in either one of this. Here you have very high fashion, good headshots of both this guy and this girl. Whitened teeth, possibly digitally touched up photos, highlights in the hair. Like, this definitely is a very good haircut. Yeah, leather jackets. It's still not super professional by old standards. They're still not button-up shirts with collars or anything like that, but these both, as high-level managers, look good, and that may very well be what they're mostly being hired for. Although I'm hoping in particular Matt Booty, a person whose name I do recognize, actually does do a lot more with ZeniMax to streamline it and get rid of all of the middle management and the inefficiency there, and in general just have a better system, because the current system in which games are being developed at ZeniMax does not work. It takes too long to make a game like Starfield for Starfield to then come out and not be as good as it should be. Sarah Bond is going to lead the team as president of Xbox, bringing together devices, player and creative experiences, platform engineering, strategy, business planning, data analytics, and business development. So if each of these different divisions had a different leadership before, and you've reorganized to organize it all under one person with one vision, that is great. And Sarah Bond may just be repeating the vision of the CEO, but at the very least having a flatter structure in Microsoft is almost certainly the right move. I'm actually a little surprised that they even did it, and now definitely is the time to do it. Matt Booty was the head of Xbox Game Studios. He's being promoted to the president of Game Content and Studios, and this will oversee the work of ZeniMax and Bethesda, although weirdly it is not overseeing the work, by this article at least, of Double Fine or 343 or any of the other acquired companies, or even Activision Blizzard. So inherently they are reorganizing right now after the acquisition happens, so they can lay off some people as being redundant. But as soon as they start to bring in more of the Activision Blizzard people, they are going to be right back at step one, in which there will be a lot of redundancy and bloat in management. Yeah, this might paint some more of a light on Pete Hines announcing he was leaving the company after 25 years for leaving Bethesda. And he was the head of publishing, so maybe he thought he was going to get a promotion. But I personally really love to hear Xbox is reorganizing. Unfortunately, they really need to reorganize again. Like, once they get Activision Blizzard in there. In all fairness though, such a big merger, it could take a year or two for them to just figure out what they acquired and figure out how all Activision and Blizzard works together. It would be a knee-jerk response to say, on day one of acquiring Activision Blizzard King, to say, okay, Activision is now a separate company, Blizzard is a separate company, King is a separate company, we're just splitting it all back together, all apart again. Like, it would be too knee-jerk, and you don't want to make one change and then realize you made a terrible change and then undo it. So it's better to just leave things as they are until you realize or can figure out how to best organize all this. And a lot of this is going to come down to personalities, how people feel about being part of Microsoft now, and how people interact with the current Microsoft employees. 2K has been retweeting and promoting this Ronnie 2K24. Apparently they are claiming to be the face of NBA 2K, named the 2023 Adweek Top 100 Media Innovators Reimagining the Future. So they're some kind of advertising company. Weirdly though, it seems like their main advertisement that's caught my attention is that they're doing this Kobe rededication ceremony. So they're basically selling a video game on a tragedy of Kobe Bryant dying, and I have no idea who this girl is. So this must have been some basketball girl, or possibly Kobe Bryant's relative, child, daughter. Kobe Bryant, I believe, was the one that accidentally crashed his airplane, or was in an airplane that crashed. I don't think he was actually flying. And yeah, it's always funny when you see these giving human beings angel wings, which is not really biblical in any way. You don't get angel wings when you go to heaven. The Bible doesn't promise anything like that. Angels don't look like what you imagine when you think of angels. In the first place, they're not described that way in any biblical or historical references of the time, or other apocryphal references of the time. I guess it would be the better word to use, not historical. But yeah, just general modern Christian belief still is not that you get angels' wings. That's cartoons. Like that's Tom and Jerry dying and getting angel wings is where that comes from. And it's kind of silly that cartoons have become so prevalent that it has infected the general mindset. But what isn't silly is advertising a video game based on a tragedy. Yeah, I have no idea who Gianna is. And that really seems like the only thing they're advertising this as. If I was NBA and this, I would not be funding this, for sure. Not to that extent. Even if Kobe is on the front, like having him on the front cover is, I think, good enough. Inherently, you want to associate positive feelings and, well, being loving and dedicated to somebody passing tragically can feel somewhat positive. It's also somewhat negative too, sadness. So it's not good advertisements. Now, as I scroll back here, there's nothing else here that's really grabbing my attention as an advertisement per se. They definitely seem to be targeting the dark male, males, young adults, males of African descent seems to be their focus. I never got this meme. I saw a bunch of people were posting this picture for a few weeks and days, and eventually I just started blocking people because, yeah, I didn't even get what the meme was other than let's just troll forums and annoy people. Borderlands is weirdly catching up, it seems, and just repeating the shift codes that it has already put out. And then they retweeted Mad Moxie, I believe, as a vampire for Halloween, which this is probably the first fan art I've seen them retweet in a really long time. And then here's a cosplayer. They're certainly trying to still keep Borderlands content relevant and exciting, which is good that they're managing to do that. In comparison, Yu-Gi-Oh is a game that I play all the time, and it's not like there's a Yu-Gi-Oh Twitter feed that I'm following, and it's not like Yu-Gi-Oh is giving out codes. The mobile game I'm playing most recently, the most of, Memento Mori, has a Facebook and a Twitter feed, and they're not giving out codes on a weekly basis or even monthly basis. And yeah, there's a big difference between really trying to engage with your fans and giving out codes all the time to keep people coming back and playing, like shift codes are and Borderlands is, versus almost everybody else who makes very minimal efforts to encourage players to return. the 3 other mobile games I'm still playing, not really making any effort to make players return, other than that they're occasionally adding new content, but that doesn't even get advertised enough to matter. Here we have the GameDeveloper.com article, same thing. Microsoft reorganizing ZeniMax's staff into Xbox leadership team. Now, inherently, you almost never get the full extent of these reorganizations, though. Like, unless there's a slide that is leaked, you just don't know how many associate level employees are now under the leadership of somebody in a different division. And again, that's a real case of middle management there too, and bloated structures, bloated corporate ladders. If inherently you have 100 associates that all report to one low-level manager, and then that one low-level manager reports to a mid-level manager, and then you've changed who the mid-level manager reports to, well, that information probably doesn't even get mentioned to the low-level manager and the associate employees. So there could easily be 1,000 people that are technically under new leadership because a high-level manager has been replaced, but it doesn't change your day-to-day job experience in any way, because your boss stays the same, their boss stays the same, and some boss of your boss of a boss may change in a completely different office that you never see. Like, sometimes you can feel it though if you get a different boss, or a boss of a boss when they start changing how things are done, for better or worse, often for the worse. Power Wash Simulator DLC Back to the Future Special Pack launches November 16th. It's kind of surprising how popular Back to the Future still is. I guess it's just a decent enough movie that people like it. And in fairness, it's not like there's been thousands of better movies than Back to the Future to have come out since. But yeah, it is fairly silly if you think about your average age of what you'd expect a Power Wash Simulator player to be, which is maybe 18 years old, if not 10, 11, 12. They definitely wouldn't have seen Back to the Future in theaters or when it first came out. They may have seen it on TV, but I don't know how many kids of this generation even watch TV. And then we have another update from the Lollipop Chainsaw remastering. Here we have the Yasuda putting out a thing. It says please see attached message in English. We can do a little bit better than that and just translate the page and see what it says in Japanese translated. He's saying that Repop, which is the now remaster, not remake, they were thinking it was going to be a remake. Fans said we'd prefer just a remaster. They're still really trying to push for a remake. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too, basically. Honestly, a remake, if they can afford to do a remake and do it well, is the right move. They're saying that the battles will be improved to be more enjoyable for current action game users, including changes in the speed to eliminate the sluggish feel of chainsaw battles and improvements to input reception timing for the cheer attack and chainsaw attack combos. So they're getting into very fine minutia here, as far as we're not going to change the actual experience of what you're supposed to do. We're just going to speed it up, and we're going to improve the experience, which, yeah, on a remaster, I think that's still acceptable. At a certain level, I would like to see a sequel where they try completely different things that they obviously want to do and wanted to do. But yeah, in general, Lollipop Chainsaw of today, a remake of it or a remaster of it, should take about half as time to beat, and it really should be like a 5-hour game. Because I even remember when I first played Lollipop Chainsaw that it was a little grindy and a little repetitive, and you just don't need that in modern games. Nobody's gonna complain about a niche game being only 5 hours. As long as they don't get it too fast where it's down to like 2 hours or 2.5 hours to beat at the most, they're fine. But yeah, I'm hoping that they can not overcommit and not do too much, and anything they learn in remastering Lollipop Chainsaw could be used in a potential sequel, which I would much prefer to see a sequel happen where you tell a new story and continue the story, and just have a new set of bosses to fight, or at least returning the bosses. You really could tell the same story over again. You could have the exact same bosses return and just give them in completely different attack patterns, but have it just be the same story over again. That would be fine. Or you could inherently say that the zombie apocalypse happened and then it suddenly stopped, and then she went back to high school, and so she was like a freshman the first year. You could say she was a freshman even if she wasn't technically a freshman. And then, or you know what, for Juliet as a character, you could just say she failed whatever class she was in, and so she's doing the year over again. And then that gives you the opportunity where you could have a sequel where she was a freshman to being a junior to being a sophomore to being a senior. And then you could have 3 or 4 games where she still is a high school cheerleader. And then by that point you could do a full-on reboot if you could get enough success. It's highly unlikely you could get that much success. Though, that you would move her on to college and do another 4 years or 4 games, 1 per year. There is still pushback, and arguably it's a little bit more than when Lollipop Chainsaw first was released, around having attractive 3 female models in games, and in particular showing off butts here. You can see in this case the boyfriend's head covering up the back of her skirt that is so short it definitely would be showing her underwear if it wasn't there. So you'll get a little bit of pushback around that. There's been some pushback around mods to make the butts more attractive in Starfield, and maybe Spider-Man 2 was the other game. But yeah, I don't think it's really a big amount of pushback. Right now is probably the perfect time to put out a game like this anyways, because if somebody's complaining about like attractive female characters in video games, you can very easily shout down those social justice warrior armchair activists and say, why the heck are you talking about video games showing butts when we're in the middle of this whole Israel-Gaza conflict, and there's just so much going on around the world, everywhere, Ukraine, the US election, all kinds of global warming, things like that. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of more important things than whether or not a anime girl in a video game is too sexy or not. So slipping out a game like this now is probably really smart. The English translation here is a little different. It says, we'd like to revamp the battles into something that console action game players of today will enjoy. As such, we're doing away with any sluggishness in chainsaw battles, with speed adjustments, improving the input timing for cheerleader and chainsaw combo attacks, as well as improving the camera movements. In general, they're speeding things up and making it easier, which is fine. Like, This is a game that is a great example of a game that should be a bridge between an actual adult content sex game and every other rated M for mature game that has no skin showing at all and no sensuality or sexuality in it at all. And for that reason, since most adult games tend to want to be super easy, like there's slide puzzle games and jigsaw puzzle games, or they're just visual novels that just go forward no matter what, it makes a lot of sense to shift your game a little bit to being easier and more accessible for players who very possibly don't play a lot of video games. You might bring in a very different audience with this. So, yeah, we're still getting a decent amount of updates from Lollipop Chainsaw 2, which it's nice to see those updates, although with every update it does come off very much like he is trying to hold back a very potentially angry mob of Lollipop Chainsaw fanatics really, who will revolt at the drop of a hat if something goes wrong. Here we've got my chart again as far as what games people were playing in the past couple days. PUBG going back up, with Apex Legends going back up. The Naraka Blade Point hitting a peak and then being back, where Baldur's Gate 3 is just continuously declining. And we have a playtest for a game called The Finals showing up. So this must have been a new release. And this is definitely a point we have not seen so far as going back to the 6th of September. Like, we have only seen things like Cyberpunk 2077 return from the charts into the high parts, and you can see that Cyberpunk 2077 now has fallen all the way down. But around the 20th of October now, it seems like we are starting to see several games fall downward. Team Fortress 2 losing its fandom because I guess people are finally just giving up and started playing Counter-Strike 2. Rust getting a bit of a boost still. But I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more of this, where games get released at very high numbers and we start to see a almost complete line where several of the top games fall down, which that inherently means that they're not growing. Party Animals is another example, I guess, over here. Now that I've adjusted the scale, that launched at just barely over 100,000 and immediately fell downward. It's just tiny little ones peaking like War Thunder. There still probably is some room for scaling this better, and I was supposed to turn the logarithmic scaling off so that this would look more accurate, because the ups and downs here are not being accurately depicted. Like, the difference in distance between 400 and 500 is half between 300 and 400. So yeah, I'll have to remind myself to go back and work on the scale there. And it still may be a case where if I just went down the list here, there might be some more useful information. It would be nice if there was a way to highlight things that are brand new, and as in they've never been in the records before. But yeah, I'm not sure there's really a way to get to that. Alright. So I ran the macro with the new plugin disabled today, and it mostly ran, although it still failed for some reason to open any of the new games, so I had to manually do that. And I really haven't seen that happen before. But then I enabled the new plugin, so theoretically if I open a new tab, I would expect it to open on the left, but I bet it won't because the pages would have to be reloaded first. Video Games Chronicles articles. Ubisoft has delayed a large game thought to be Star Wars Outlaws to next fiscal year. Pretty much just have to take that as rumors. October's Xbox update adds keyboard mapping for controllers and a Clip Champ capture importing. The PC video editing tool now lets players import directly from their Xbox cloud storage. So I guess Clip Champ is a new software. Yeah, which, yeah, I feel like we will get to that point certainly where you'll see console gamers still wanting to put out clips, or at least shorts, online. You can get it from OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, or Xbox. Dropbox at this point really failing to do anything new or useful. It'd be very weird to use Dropbox nowadays when you can just use Google Drive and almost certainly already have a Google account, or OneDrive if Microsoft forced you into making a Microsoft account. Let's see. Apparently the suit from the Batman was briefly added to the Arkham Knight on the Epic Games Store. This new free screen was added with little warning, then removed. What game is called The Batman? The new skin let players use the suit from The Batman, the 2022 movie starring Robert Pattinson as Batman. So apparently, I guess it was the idea that there would be a promotional release, and either that negotiation fell apart because Arkham Knight was so terrible, or and they never released it, or they're contractually obliged to release it, but they didn't really want to release it and promote Arkham Knight, so they released it for a second and then unreleased it. I imagine it's probably more of a mistake. I would suspect it'll be interesting to see if this suit never gets released again. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some contractual obligation to release it, where they just released it for a day, then took it down on the Epic Games Store where nobody would see it, just because they have no interest in promoting Arkham Knight. Although, in all fairness, why not promote Arkham Knight? It's not like you have any other Batman game right now that you're really trying to promote that much. The Arkham Knights game. See, that's the weird part about this too, is that Arkham Knight, I think, was the last one with Batman in, but then they released the game where you play as the other characters, Batgirl and Nighthawk and Nightwing and Red Robin. So, yeah, I'm a little confused here as to whether your Arkham Knight is the Batman game and this is just a different suit for Batman, which would make a lot of sense, or whether Arkham Knight is the game where you would be playing as like Red Robin and it's letting you put on a Batman suit, which that wouldn't make a lot of sense. Inherently, I think that also highlights the terrible situation they put themselves in that instead of just continuing to make Arkham series Batman games or rebooting and making new Batman series games, they decided to commit to the idea that Batman is still dead and making a Batman game without Batman, which is just insanity. They really should have just rebooted this series and let's just make a new Batman that's perhaps less realistic, less dark, reimagine Batman like they do in the Batman movies over and over again. It's like every time you have a new actor playing Batman, you're letting a different director reimagine who it is. That's what they should do with the video games. But instead, they have nothing to offer and nothing to advertise, which makes the release of a new suit very weird. Apparently, Diablo 4 has a free trial on PC this weekend. Players can try the game out until October 30th. Why bother, though? Like, even if you really love the game, you're going to have to ask yourself whether you love it enough when the season resets and you have to start all over again. Inherently, Diablo 4 is flawed because of its seasonality. And I just don't think I could ever get beyond that point. We already talked about Connie Booth leaving Sony. Apparently Remedy details plans for 2 Alan Wake 2 expansions. Okay. I saw, I think, one review of Alan Wake saying it was alright, I think. I didn't really read it. Fortnite V-Buck prices increased today in some countries, including the US and most of Europe. Sony has defended its decision to raise the PlayStation Plus prices by 35%. Quote, we have to look at our pricing and we have to adjust to market conditions. I don't know why they would bother to even make a comment. Yeah. Just don't respond. Do your standard no comment. Which, by the way, no comment doesn't mean you respond with no comment. You just don't respond. Because if somebody can quote you as saying no comment, you look pretty bad. Apparently, Apex Legends is finally actually adding cross progression in Season 19. Nintendo is reportedly launching a new Switch OLED bundle in November. Console looks to be packed with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Very believable. Starbreeze has apologized for the lack of updates on Payday 3's delayed first patch. The patch is currently going through testing and certification process, which in that case an apology probably is helpful since the patch probably had already been announced and promised, so that there is a reason to make a comment and apologize. Although, is there a real apology here? Or is this just a statement of fact? They're probably getting a lot of questions and pushback. It's a lot of text here, actually. We see your frustration and anger is still not a apology. Yeah. Skimming this entire statement, which is several paragraphs long, there isn't an actual apology in here. And that's just, I think, another example of Video Games Chronicles being a bad reporter. Like, don't say there's an apology there unless the word I apologize or we are sorry appears in the content. You could say non-apologizes or explains the lack of updates. But yeah, there's no apology in there as far as I can see. We already talked about Disney Dreamlight. No longer going free to play when it leaves early access. I guess they must have promised that it would have been free to play. Which, yeah, breaking a promise as a game publisher or developer is a big problem there. it definitely does not encourage me to want to play Dreamlight Valley now, if they're going to say it's going to be free to play when it isn't. I really think Dreamlight Valley is probably a great example of something that Disney should take away from, or license the exact same concept to a different company to make the exact same game, but just do it a little bit better, because the monetization there is crazy. But almost certainly it's more a case that Disney is the one in charge of why the monetization is crazy, and so Disney is probably more than happy to rip off adult Disney fans with Dreamlight Valley instead of making a product that could rival something like Animal Crossing and be a big seller for Disney, and potentially even get more people to go to the Disneylands and Disney Worlds, theme parks. But yeah, noticeably, the theme parks are also incredibly expensive and have raised their ticket prices well beyond the point of it being logical to go and spend the money on it. Apparently, a Finnish fashion brand has launched an Alan Wake 2 line, which that's somewhat of a weird cross promotion, but it's not the first time certainly we've seen games with t-shirts. It's just the first time they've tried to make it seem like it's high fashion instead of just t-shirts with prints on them, which it still looks to me like that's exactly what those are, sweaters and t-shirts with prints on them. Early EA Sports Football Club 24 players could receive a free Erling Haaland in the Ultimate Team. The special version of the Norwegian striker is lower rated than his normal item. So you're getting a free character that you wouldn't ever play, apparently. Okay, that seems weird. We already talked about game industry mergers and acquisitions expected to increase steadily over the next year. And then apparently this first in-engine look of Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake using the Unreal Engine 5 was one of the Xbox indie presentation videos. So there was this whole Xbox event that happened on Wednesday, I believe, and I said at the time it didn't seem like any new games had come out or been announced from it, and that basically was the case. There was about 3 announcements, and this seemed to be the major one. I did hear from another reporter that it seems like some people kind of feel like the visuals of the Unreal Engine 5 destroys the kind of cartooniness and the original feeling of Metal Gear Solid 3. Also heard people who are much more informed than me as far as just how many spin-off Metal Gear Solid games there are and how bad in comparison the re-releases and remasters are, in the fact that there are probably at least 9 other games that are not available for purchase or play at the moment that could have also been in that Metal Gear Solid Master Collection had Konami really cared or really tried. Which that definitely paints it in a different picture when you call something a Master Collection and really it's just a bundling of purchasing remasters of 3 of your mainline games. We already talked about Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth having an Animal Crossing style island sub-game. And yeah, I really don't have anything to say about that anyways. And then apparently Alan Wake 2's New Game Plus mode will include a new alternative narrative in a post-launch update, which by default I would assume what that means is in the main game you probably have Alan Wake narrating the events that happen around this girl and everybody else, and I wouldn't be surprised if this lady, to be more accurate, narrates a completely different story of what's happening on the New Game Plus. That brings us to the Gamatsu articles. Alan Wake 2's launch trailer. Risk of Rain returns, launches November 8th. Returns being part of the title there. It's coming out on Steam. And it's already on the fall list. Interesting. Let's see. Sonabi launches November 9th. Let's see what that looks like. This one is already overwhelmingly positive and on Steam, so it's leaving early access. Which I guess that means that I put this on the wish list inaccurately. I really shouldn't have early access games on the wish list. Star Ocean, the second story R, has a launch trailer and more information in general if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Arknight's Infield teaser trailer, second gameplay demo is available if you want to check that out. I was just about to mention this actually. Sinnoh Alice game is going to end service after 6 years on January 15th. The global version is ending November 15th of 2023, so even earlier. Sinnoh Alice was a game made by a somewhat prominent, I believe, Final Fantasy creator. One of, I think, several people who were involved in creating one of the Final Fantasy games. Inherently, it may be a case that mobile games do just run out of steam after 3 to 6 years anyways. And that's not really terrible, but it kind of sucks. I would prefer games to still be playable, at least for preservation reasons. It'll be interesting when comparing the shutdown of Sinnoh Alice, a much more prominent game, as far as whether they release a memorial version or let you in some way still see some of the art and content of the game, comparing that to, of course, the game I was playing, Destiny Child, until it shut down a month or two ago. Which, in all fairness, they did release a memorial version of Destiny Child, and I just haven't really gone back to look at it or use it in its memorial version since then. In the past month, I've been more focused on just playing newer games, in particular Memento Mori, which is a year-old game, so if it ends in 3 to 5 years, I am only going to get 3 or 4 years out of it of gameplay, which, in all fairness, 3 years of daily gameplay, even if the gameplay is mostly idle nonsense and gacha microtransaction encouraging nonsense, it's still a lot of game. It's a lot of time you're putting into it, compared to just your $60 game that you may play for 3 months at most and then put away forever. Ark Survival Ascended is now available in early access for PC and is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series in November. This was the other game that was announced, although in all fairness, I don't know if you can really call it a big announcement, considering so much controversy around it, and you can see it's not even now being received particularly well. Let's see, Uto no Prince Sama Shining Live is going to end service on December 26th in Japan, and the Switch version is currently in development. This was a smartphone rhythm game, ending service after 6 years, although 6 years of rhythm game is actually quite more of a commitment. It's kind of weird though that you're going to end the online service and then make a Switch version. Um, It's going to feature various contents from the iOS and Android versions. We may see this happen more though. You may see smartphone games that get a lot of money through microtransactions for 4 or 5 years, and then they say, alright, we're not making enough money in this version, let's shut down the mobile versions and then let's just make a Switch game and get rid of the microtransaction idea and make a better game and sell it a second time with the same content, which maybe that would work too. Inherently, if they came out with a PC version of Destiny Child, the Korean game called Destiny Child, and they got rid of all the microtransactions and sold it as a full product, that might appeal to me somewhat. It still probably wouldn't work particularly well because the story never ended, and there is an actual story going on in Destiny Child. There was the Korean version kind of ended the story, but not really. It was a cheap way to a butt pull is what it's being described as. You're just pulling a solution out of your butt without really setting down the foundation to explain how that could have happened. Moving on, I need to hurry up. Berserk Recharged launches November 9th, seemingly for everything here. Yep, and apparently I already put this on the follow list. Famitsu sales have been updated from the 16th to the 22nd. Super Mario Wonder taking the #1 spot. Marvel Spider-Man 2 taking the #2 spot. Really not anything negative to say about either one of those games, per se. The biggest complaint I've heard about Super Mario Bros. Wonder is the fact that if you want to play as a character that can't die, you have to basically play as Nabbit or maybe the Yoshis, one of the Yoshis. But if you're a little girl and you're like 2 or 3, you probably want to play as Princess Peach. So why can't you just toggle on invincibility on Princess Peach instead of forcing the player to play as a character they don't care about as far as Nabbit? And I've heard at least 2 different people make this complaint saying, hey, why not just make it toggleable? There is a slight difference in Super Mario Bros. Wonder in that in the multiplayer, characters can't bump into each other or jump off each other's heads, which creates less chaos, which is probably a good thing, but it also creates less chaos, which can be more boring. Sonic Superstars coming out on the 9th spot, and World of Horror coming out on the 11th spot. Nintendo Switch owning all the spots in the top 19 except for the PlayStation 5 Marvel Spider-Man 2. And then EA Sports FC 24 taking the 20th spot, and Nintendo Switch owning a bunch more, and then Assassin's Creed Mirage taking the 27th spot. Clearly you can see week to week very consistently the Nintendo Switch is outselling software-wise than the PlayStation, and that is eventually just going to wreck the PlayStation. You also see that reflected heavily in the combined total hardware sales between the Switch OLED and the main Switch and the Switch Lite being basically 50,000 more units per week compared to the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition. And the overall lifetime, even though the Switch has been out for much longer, is at least 2 million higher. But maybe the PlayStation 5 would eventually surpass that or catch up to that. But it's hard to make comparisons there when a potential Switch 2 gets released, and I suspect it will sell very, very well unless it offers something very crazy. Even the non-competition of these Xbox Series X and Series S is still getting higher and higher compared to the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition. It is frankly amazing to see the Xbox Series X outselling the Digital Edition, even for 1 week. Let's see, a game called Born of Bread launches December 5th, a home cooking turn-based role-playing adventure game. This two already on the fall list, which that is definitely telling me that I am getting and seeing games more quicker than even Gamatsu is seeing them, which is good news. Blasphemous 2 is coming to the PS4 and Xbox One on November 2nd. I'm pretty sure we already put that on the fall list. Power Wash Simulator 2 being launched. See if we can get that part specifically. Nope, right now the Back to the Future, is it DLC or was it just an update? Yeah, the DLC is not available to see on Steam, so I'm not going to make a short unless I could specifically see the DLC. I'm still not 100% sure I can make YouTube shorts based on DLC anyways, or that it looks any good. Arizona Sunshine 2 launches December 7th for the PlayStation VR 2, Steam VR, and Quest. Arizona Sunshine being one of the few games that kind of felt like it was a real game for VR. Noticeably though, I don't have a link to Steam. 9 Years of Shadows for Switch launches November 9th. It's currently on PC. Yep. Mars 2120 launches March 28th, 2024 for all consoles and PC. It might very well be a case too that we are going to run into a situation where, as it gets closer to the end of the year, things that I've already seen announced start getting released more and more, and so it is just going to be a kind of catch-up time. Raku Venture launches December 14th for all consoles and PC. I don't think I'd seen this one, but I guess I was wrong. Still very much is a case where day to day I look at so many games, like I immediately forget them as soon as I look at them. Bim Fito launches November 9th for all consoles and PCs. Finally found one that I hadn't already seen. The Visco Collection is now available. I have no idea what the Visco Collection is. I'm seeing a lot of what looks like 90s or 80s arcade games. Arcade side art, basically. Yeah, never heard of the company, don't recognize any of the games. There is something to be said about these, I would call these early 80s anime styles where characters are just super muscly and fairly crazy in their designs. Like we don't really get that anymore. And a throwback to that might be interesting, although in all fairness, when you look at these games, the actual images in the games are not the characters in the side art. Like, you don't get these characters, you get little pixely 16-bit sprites. I would call them 16-bit sprites. Top Racer Collection launches January 11th for all consoles and PCs. This too is probably a collection of old games I don't recognize. Now, Outrun and racing games like this all looked exactly the same, so it's pretty difficult to tell. Like I easily could have played a game called Top Racer and thought of and remembered it as a different kind of Outrun style game. Custom Mech Wars prototype version demos now available for the PS5. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus Rising crossplay open beta test is set for November 9th to the 12th for the PS4 and 5 and PC. Do they have a link to Steam though? Yeah, I don't think I really want to make a YouTube short on a game just because there's an open beta though. Radiant Silvergun for PC launches November 3rd. I couldn't swear that there was a game called Radiant Silvergun a long time ago, but maybe not. Maybe. Yeah, it's hard to tell if this is a brand new game or if this is a re-release of a very old game. Could be one or the other. Well, regardless, it's already on the follow list, so I assume I made a short around it. It's a port of the Xbox 360 version, so yeah. It is an older game, but not that old of a game. Thus, it not looking that old and confusing me. Otogi Katsugeki Mameda no Bakaru Oracle Saitaru Rou no Cyanan has its stages trailer. That was way too much of a mouthful for me to bother with. This is almost certainly not coming to the West with that name, at least. It's also a Switch only game from the looks of it. Let's see, Mist Rogue Mist in the Living Dungeons is now available for PC and it's coming to the Switch this winter. What kind of game is that? Looks like it's a very complicated dungeon crawler game. Nothing that would particularly interest me. Then, well, I talked about Dreamlight Valley. Don't need to cover that again. Little Nightmares 3, the Necropolis 2-player co-op gameplay walkthrough is available on Gematsu if you want to check that out. And then Ghost Knight, a Dark Tale demo is now available. Which just then brings us to the GameDeveloper.com articles. Reality Labs has lost $11.4 billion during 2023, and there's still a quarter left of 2023, which really highlights Meta's mixed reality division is either losing or investing, depending on how you want to sell it, quite a lot. Putting a lot of effort into the idea of a metaverse and VR, and yeah, I'm not sure they're going to get $11 billion back from their efforts. Apparently, the Artisan CEOs will, quote, accept criticism after opening a new studio in Saudi Arabia. The French company has expanded inside of Ryda, or Ryada, RIYADH, with the help from Saudi Arabian government, with studio co-founder Mario Rizzo claiming the region to be deeply misunderstood. Yeah, quote unquote, deeply misunderstood. It's not the region, and it's important to make this point out too. It really isn't the region. Like, it's the government, it's the people in charge, it's the decision makers, the rich, the aristocrats, the 1% of the 1% that are affecting how Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia are run, how they're felt, how they're interacted. There is, I think, in my opinion, a fact that if you force a theocracy and a religion down the throats of the people, you may have 90% of the populace go along with it but not really accept it in their hearts. But you still get that 10% that will die for the cause and will maintain it. In the United States, which I can certainly speak to more, you're increasingly seeing fewer and fewer people go to churches, but it is doing really nothing so far as far as how religion has had lobbying influence of the government, and the government using religion to justify its own actions or making actions simply to get the religious lobbyists to continue to support them and vote for them. Which, yeah, it doesn't matter if 99.9% of Saudi Arabian's people aren't really going to try to make video games that follow Islam and Islamic teaching to the letter. It doesn't matter if that 0.1% is the 0.1% that's in charge and that's controlling everything. And certainly at small levels, the expectation isn't going to be that you're just going to have all the characters in a fantasy game wearing burqas. That would be the extreme version of it. You're just going to start to see one more veil, a little less leg showing, a little bit bulkier armor, less pretty characters, less females in general. It'll just be death by 1,000 cuts of games. Inherently, in most RPGs, you end up fighting something that's called a god. In a Saudi Arabian game company, they probably won't call anything a god. You won't be fighting a god. You won't be killing a god. There won't be the phrase god used. Little g or big G. Either way. Whether you mean just a god, little g, or whether you mean the Judeo-Christian big G god, Yahweh. But yeah. I also would say, I suspect when you have Muslims and people who follow Islam or want to respect Islam in France, they are having very different interactions and very different experiences. People who are Muslim in France almost certainly not anywhere as not exactly the same, but probably not anywhere as rigid in their beliefs as people in Saudi Arabia, or at least the government in Saudi Arabia is. And it is worth pointing out, it's undeniable that a lot of Muslims have become refugees and flown into Europe, have fled into Europe because their own countries and their own governments are so bad for one reason or another. So yeah, to say you accept criticism is fine and all. I guess it's something you could say, but yeah, just from that headline alone, it seems like they already have their head in the sand. But I could also see why they would think that Saudi Arabia is a deeply misunderstood part of the world, because almost certainly this French company, all its CEOs and executives, were flown to Saudi Arabia and shown a carefully plotted plan, much like if you go to North Korea, you see all the good parts of North Korea carefully plotted. You don't see the cities and starvation and things they don't want you to see. So easily I could see somebody being tricked or allowing themselves to be tricked into seeing what the Saudi Arabian government wanted them to see versus the reality of the situation, which in particular I question whether Saudi Arabian people can program games or if they're just going to make a game company to import a bunch of foreign workers to work on games. I'm not sure. There's at least one Middle Eastern country I've heard about where the people, for the most part, are just not used to working at all. They don't want to work. They're rich from oil funds that they get paid. So the entire country is effectively already on like a universal basic income, and they just don't have a desire to work regular jobs. And I don't think they particularly have a desire to make video games. Whereas if you were a Saudi Arabian citizen and you wanted to make video games, you probably would just go and be educated in a Western country and learn to make video games and work in that Western country. Not try to do it inside of Saudi Arabia itself. Moving on though. Capcom says flagship titles like Street Fighter 6 are driving sales. Ubisoft overperforms in quarter 2, seeing record first half for 2023-2024 fiscal year, which are already into their new fiscal year. It's so weird that they move those dates around and it's not just January to December. Microsoft reorganizes ZeniMax staff into the Xbox leadership team. I already talked about that. Call of Duty Warzone Mobile is going to deploy in spring of 2024. And then we talked about the Games for Gaza bundle. And then Ubisoft is going to take NCIS and old Assassin's Creed games offline in January. Ubisoft stating in 2024 that a small list of classic games have been their online services with a small list of classic games having their online services decommissioned, including legacy Assassin's Creed titles and Trials Evolution. Not sure if any of them are 100% unplayable at that point, but increasingly we're seeing this where even if it isn't actually costing them anything to maintain these servers, which I imagine it is costing them something to maintain these servers, you're seeing companies still take down online games. And if you're talking like Assassin's Creed 1, that's probably 10-15 years ago. It's not expectable that anybody 10 or 15 years ago would have had the foresight to say the online services here will eventually be shut down and that's going to be a real problem. People probably were saying that, but in general your average gamer wasn't listening to that kind of thought. But now in retrospect it really sucks, and particularly the Assassin's Creed titles and Trials Evolution, which are popular titles, should be treated better. Now other games that aren't even being mentioned in the headlines maybe don't matter as much, and these may be very specific versions of things like Assassin's Creed 2 or Assassin's Creed Liberation. So it's probably not as big of a deal as it first sounds. They're saying Assassin's Creed titles, but then they're actually mentioning the Xbox 360 version of Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed Liberation HD. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the 360 versions of games in general start to just get decommissioned more and more. We have some fall list cleanup we can do here. Let's see, we have a game called Glass Heart, which is mostly positive, but it isn't really catching my attention. It's a Otome young maiden visual novel, but I don't think the visuals are quite good enough to catch my attention, so I'm going to get rid of that. Glaciered. I remember this game being announced. It's still, I guess, in development. The weird underwater only game where you're frozen underwater. Girls 3 Civilization has no reason to even be on the fall list, so we can get rid of that. Girls Tennis League. Still really don't have a great tennis game. I'm gonna leave that and give it more chance, even though it's highly unlikely to be successful. Girl Genius Adventures needs more time. And then the next game is completely missing, so must have been delisted completely. Which is funny, it stays on the fall list even if the game is completely delisted, when it should just leave the fall list. Steam Scream here on the front page. Apparently you have a free daily reward you can claim. As far as stickers. And then they're doing sales. So they're just having a kind of Halloween October sale, but I don't know if there's really a good reason to go for this sale when there might be a Black Friday fall sale that's bigger. Is this an adult game? It seems like it. Still feels very weird when you run into an adult game. So what does this button do here? Well, it says more items for your favorite spooky games at the point shop. Yeah, it just takes you to the point shop. I don't know if any of these really connect to any of the games I'm playing. And then you have like Cult of the Lamb here, but then Cult of the Lamb say that they were going to potentially remove their game from sale because of the Unity nonsense. You have like Dying Light 2, Doom Eternal. I'm not sure I own or played either one of those games. Phasmophobia, Hunt to Showdown. Dead Space I've played. But all of these games are way too... all these little stickers and things are way too expensive to really bother with. It's not like you get a ton of points here for doing nothing. What's this? Darkest Dungeon, Mortal Kombat 11, more Darkest Dungeon, Control Ultimate Edition. They're making a subset of games, and I'd say almost half of all games have some kind of horror element to it, and you can pretend like they're a Halloween game, but very few of the games actually say the word Halloween or are actually horror games in any way. They just happen to lean on the crutch of the idea of having a monster, and when you have a monster, then you can let the player shoot the monsters or shoot at a monster without feeling bad about shooting a human being. Let's see. If we go here and look at the discounted things, like Resident Evil 4 with the DLC, might be something, but for the most part these really are just the exact same games. Some of them are newer, like Slay the Princess here, or the Mortuary Assistant. Let's open that one up. I think that's probably already on the fall list. But yeah, you're really not getting promoted anything new or trending until you go down here and click new and trending. Which the problem with that is then you're just going to have a lot of garbage horror jump scare games. Steam Deck. It's not going to really change too much. There's something wrong with how this runs now. Yeah, it's glitching out when I hover over things. Probably because of some ad I'm blocking somewhere. No special profiles or anything for the Steam Deck, noticeably. When it would have made a lot of sense to do that. Yeah, as far as the Mortuary Assistant goes, is this a VR game? No. Yep. I believe Game Grumps covered this game. And that's probably why it's got so many reviews. But I'll put it on the wish list. This next game is an adult visual novel. Noticeably, here we have an adult visual novel that's 85% positive with 327 reviews. It came out February 10th of 2023. You have none of the screenshots showing any nudity, so I can show it on YouTube. And it was in the adults only section, and yet it's completely missing. The game says it has general mature content, and yeah, it's just completely missing. And I can either assume I don't know why the game is missing, or I can lean into my theory, my conspiracy theory, that there's some censorship that happened here. I mean, in this case, you have an anime girl who barely is even on the kawaii style. She's a little bit shorter, a little bit anatomically incorrect in her head and neck. But she definitely isn't particularly looking anything close to an underage character. And yet, I wouldn't be surprised if Valve's distaste for successful, in particular, anime style games or anime style adult games led them to delisting this game. Although if Valve really did kick it off and it wasn't the developer and publisher who removed it, then why would it still be here? Why wouldn't it be missing completely? So I have to really take a step back to reality, take off my tinfoil hat and say almost certainly this is a case where something else went wrong and the developer and publisher removed it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a trick that could be pulled where you could make a game like this and have nudity and adult content in a different version on a different storefront, and then just use Steam as a way of advertising your game to then remove it and sell it on a different storefront. Yeah, but you can't link to that other storefront, so I'm not sure what you really benefit from having a Steam page is if the link to purchase it is missing. And even according to SteamDB, the price was actually fairly low, to $3.15 for a visual novel in general. It's pretty good. Well, there's really nothing I can do there, so I'll just take it off the follow list. Meanwhile, we have a game called Gigant, which I'll give a little more time to. Although, why am I giving it more time to? it's a horror point and click adventure. I'm going to have to make an executive decision. It is 79% positive. I'm going to say go ahead and put it on the wish list, since standards for the wish list aren't really that high. Then we have a game called Gift that's not out yet. And then we have Giants Uprising, which is mixed reviewed, so we can take that off the follow list. And then that brings us to all the new games on Steam, which means we can burn through things fairly quickly. I manually had to open things, so some of the I went back probably too far. Like Cafe Made Hentai Edition is already on the follow list, so I already looked at that, which means we probably already looked at Haunted House Builder. The idea is not a terrible thought, but it's obviously just an asset flip decorating game. Open Wheel Manager doesn't look like anything. From Fear doesn't look good enough. Malice doesn't look good enough. A lot of Dark Screenshot Syndrome. Aliens Nightmare 2 is already on the follow list. So is Bloodbound. Yeah, I don't 100% know why the my macro didn't work, but I think I fixed it. I'm hoping I did. This game Delirium, where you're playing as evil My Little Pony characters, is overwhelmingly positive, which is weird. So I guess mob rule here: when you have 790 internet trolls potentially saying positive things, it's at least worth making a YouTube short on it and seeing if it actually sells. And I assume, probably inaccurately, that it's internet trolls. You can't get a 96% positive, I would hope, by 760 internet trolls. So there must really be a good game in here, would be my guess. Next we have an adult game that's 2D CGI called Selfie Girls. You have more of a realistic color palette of girls taking selfies with selfie sticks or just with their phones. That gimmick in particular isn't really adding much to it. Inherently, it just means they're drawing the girl with an arm in an awkward position, which doesn't really help anything. And when you take a selfie in general, you're tending not to lift your arm so high that you're showing off an armpit or something like that, where there might actually be some fetish there. So yeah, I wouldn't say the art style is 100% as good as I'd like. Some of the necks and heads seem to be awkwardly twisted, like they're basically detached from the bodies. And the art style is right in the middle. $1.59 for a slide puzzle, English only, though. And it probably, if I was to guess, has just about 8 pictures in total. Selfies, though, it's kind of hard to say selfies are a fetish that anybody would actually be interested in. Like, it's not like voyeurism where they don't know, and it's not like you're getting unique poses or good poses. You're getting worse poses compared to every other game that would, or a screenshot or photo that's taken where you just assume that there's a camera or a cameraman. Next we have an adult game here that's 2D. I'd say it's still a Western animation style, but they're aliens, so they're different colors, so it is a little bit more colorful, called the Alien Girls. This one's a memory game. The problem with this, though, is you're having these elf-like alien creatures, and everyone is slightly different color skin, different color ears, having tails, not having tails, different kinds of tails. So even if you had a specific fetish for a specific type of alien, you never get that one type, you get 5 or 6 different types. Again, this game is $1.59 in English only, probably from the same publisher if I was to guess. I tend not to pay attention to that. Let's see, we have a G-mode game, which I don't think I really want to bother to promote these G-mode games other than Gregory House might actually be relevant, so I'll change my mind immediately. Do these support English? No, they don't. Alright, let's go back and take it off then, because they don't support English. Next we have a game called Reach the Light, which is one of those platforming games, which I'm so glad we didn't see that trend continue. Let's see, next we have a game called Drenched Girls that's not in the adult section, so I assume it's just a visual novel, $19.99. Weirdly, no Asian languages in the top tier here at all. Yeah, and it's interface only. So I'd have to kind of assume it's an English Western game, just trying to look like it. So what do you do with something like this? I don't want to make a YouTube short on it. I kind of want to put it on the follow list, but I really don't feel like there's even a reason for that. I guess for a secondary reason, I'll just put it on the follow list and see if people actually like it. But I doubt that's what's going to happen. And then we have one that's already on the follow list that's very positive. Maybe this one came out of early access. Let's see, this is to a visual novel, so I'll just throw it on the wish list. Particularly right now, because I just have no way of mentally spending the energy. This one already is on the follow list. This one looks like garbage. Here we have another adult game called Hentai Rina. It's a slide puzzle game. One 2D black-haired anime girl with big boobs being focused on. Which honestly, I think that's probably the better way to do it, is to have just one character be your main character. Particularly if you're only going to have 5 or 6 images. It's selling for 74 cents. And it's bundled with 67 other games for $57.07. Which, yeah, that's certainly a cheap puzzle. But maybe that's really the price. That really is the price point that those games should be sold at, if they're going to be sold on Steam at all. I'm a little surprised that they don't do more bundling or return the characters. I still would like to see more quality. This game looks like garbage in the adult games in general, on average. But weirdly, we also are continuing to see a lot of anime style 2D adult games in the first place, whereas for the past 2 weeks we really haven't seen any, and maybe that was just a fluke. I don't know, maybe it had something to do with just release dates, and those types of games only get released at a certain point. But yeah, I'm not sure. This game Surrogate looks very weird, so I'm gonna give it a chance. If anything, I would generally expect that there's actually just somebody else in charge now. And then we have College Sex Episode 3, which is a 3D CGI realistic visual novel. They're calling it a dating sim, but I'm pretty sure it's mostly just a visual novel. And yeah, these are still exactly the same. This one sells for $2.39, English interface only. Several different bundles going on there. If anything, it perhaps highlights that making an 8-picture slide puzzle is about a third of the expense of making a 3D CGI visual novel, so they can charge about a third as much, although what they charge probably has very little to do with the actual amounts they're spending to develop these games. Imagine they're not spending much at all. See, now this looks like this is a platforming game, but also when you get on the rocks and platform, you are fighting, which is an interesting twist, certainly, but still visually isn't polished enough for me to say yes to it. A lowrider simulator. I mean, that's something different, so I'm going to give it a chance. Hopefully we're close to the end, but I bet we aren't. Paintball 3 Candy Factory. Give that a chance. My Daughter is a Cultist SE. There might be something to this. We are seeing an increase in horror style games. Hide and Prop. I think I'm gonna say no to this. Now this game, Wizardry, The 5 Ordeals, is a very, very old game. And so it's very relevant. In fact, I can just go ahead and put it on the wish list right here. Even though, if you have no nostalgia for this game, there really is no reason to play a dungeon crawler like this. And my real hope would be that this game sells well enough to convince people to potentially take what they like from Wizardry and make something much closer to Skyrim with it. Although inherently Skyrim may have taken everything it is from games like Wizardry, so there may not be anything new to turn Wizardry into. You can't just make this 3D and give controller support and free movement and make a game like Wizardry make sense these days. Here we have another game, adult game. This one called Colored Eyes Girl. Different colored eyes is what they mean. And while it is a cartoony, colorful art style, I would say the proportions and art style probably is done by a Western animator. Now, while that can be somewhat intriguing to have girls with different colored eyes, you see it in anime usually to indicate some level of magic is inside of them. It really isn't changing much when you're just talking about what I assume are slide puzzles. Basically, all I've done is taken a bunch of pictures of anime girls and changed one color of one eye, and they're selling it to you for $1.59. English interface only. There's just nothing you're really going to do with the eye. If you really want to get into like eyeball fetishes, you're going to get into some fairly extreme stuff as far as plucking out eyes and penetrating eye sockets with a phallus, or shooting semen into the eyes of people. Those are all fairly extreme fetishes, not legal or recommended to do in real life. But yeah, almost certainly that level of hardcore extremists that you only see really in extreme mangas and animes that tend not to ever come to the West would never be even mentioned in a Steam game. So with that, there really is nothing else you can do. You might see characters with eye patches, but you don't even see that very often in adult games or anime games on Steam in general, is characters with eye patches. And the fetish in general of seeing characters with eye patches, I think, was in part done by a Japanese fad that I'm not sure is in any way still happening, where they were licking each other's eyeballs, which is not hygienic at all, or safe. And honestly, that's the kind of thing that could have been happening at one school and then blown out of proportion for 1 year, decades and decades ago. Next, we have another adult game called Stylish Girls, which again is more of a Western style, but fairly colorful, different hair colors at least, different girls with kind of high fashion highlights in their hair and slightly better fashion in the clothes they are wearing, although in all fairness, you kind of lose that fashion as soon as they're completely nude. Stylish Girls is $1.59, again English interface. Yeah, and this is all the same studio, basically flooding Steam at this point. Next we have Naughty Queens, which is basically the same Western animator, slightly colorful hairstyles. This time it's queens, so they have they're sitting on thrones or they're wearing crowns. Queens of different styles too, not just a English London Britain style queens. There's a more Chinese queen and more Middle Eastern Arabian queen too. $1.59 English interface only. So yeah, Necro City is out and it's already on the fall list. I'm gonna take it off the fall list at this point. And man, we're just back to adult games. If they are gonna bundle all the adult games together, they really should just bundle them all back to back. Here we have a 3D CGI visual novel called Witch's Story. These are some of the worst of the 3D CGIs because the visuals just don't match. You can see that the 3D CGI characters are really just superimposed on a low effort background of a witches brewing station lab. They're calling it an RPG. It almost certainly isn't. They're selling it for $4.19, and it's English and Russian with subtitles in simplified Chinese. And it's labeled as game_003. So definitely wouldn't want to support that. Now weirdly, this next game is not in the adult section and doesn't have any mature content warning. But there's no justification for that at all. It's called Running Crazy, and every single screenshot has the character in their underwear or see-through bikini in one case. Definitely seeing nipples, definitely seeing extreme things that should be in the adult section. And I'm fairly certain that Running Crazy is exactly a game I've already seen with the exact same images. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually kicked off of Steam for not putting the right information in, and they're still trying to list it again without it putting the right information in. It's a real great example of what not to do, and how one bad apple could really ruin the bunch as far as Steam by just actively not labeling your game correctly. This game Peaks of Yore is probably nothing, but I'm going to give it a chance. And if we can actually show off some games instead of just having to describe a bunch, that'd be great. This doesn't look good. Of course, it totally sucks that you spend 5 minutes talking about adult games and then the next 5 minutes is almost complete silence when you're just looking at garbage games. Bad French shooters, not quite good enough. Some of these games feel like they already existed and that they're just being relisted for some reason. And that is one thing I guess that's good about Steam, is that you don't see people delisting and relisting games over and over again, because that would really ruin my whole system, to the point where I'd probably give up on looking at all the new games if we were just seeing the exact same games over and over again. But we still very much are in a case where a lot of these games are not very noticeable. Even if I'm going to put a even if I was going to put a make a YouTube short on it, I still often don't have anything to say here. I kind of think this Forgotten Hill, the third axis, is actually an irrelevant game, but I'm going to give it a chance anyways instead of investigating it. Let's see, Kickback Slug, Cosmic Curry. I'm completely drained mentally, so I'm just going to basically say yes to everything. Ghost Runner 2 must have come out of early access, so we'll go ahead and put that in the wish list. Avarice 3 doesn't look like anything. Finis might be something, but probably isn't. Emo Mushi, give it a chance because of its weirdness. Lo-Fi Kitten. Yep. Just gonna say yes to everything today, pretty much. Sierra Expedition. Yeah, I'm continuing to get here's a Power Wash Simulator clone. I'm gonna say no to this. Well, actually, I'm gonna say yes to it because it's a VR version of it. I don't know if Power Wash Simulator has a VR version. Actually, I'm gonna say no to it because it looks like garbage. Yeah, I lost my train of thought as far as what I was about to say. Voltaire the Vegan Vampire. Yeah, I was saying I'm still getting subscribers. Videos are still coming out. I need to schedule some more YouTube shorts always. At the end of the last stream on Wednesday, I started to make YouTube shorts and my power went out, and so I was out of power for like 3 hours, which was just another distraction I did not need. But yeah, this is a prelude, so I'm gonna say no to it. Yep. Just falling further and further behind because of this kinds of nonsense. I'm gonna put this on the fall list, but not make a short on it. Here we have a non-game called Desktop Pet Project, which, okay, I'm not gonna promote that. Happy Lab looks like it's definitely taking things from the Portal game, which they may be allowed to actually do that, honestly, because I think they open sourced a lot of the Portal stuff. Or if you remake the signs from Portal, that doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, in general, I'm not doing anything to really support or promote my channel in the past couple of weeks I'm not making new footage, which is the main problem, but I'm also not scheduling footage. So even when I finish programming this on-air site, it's really just going to be more work afterwards. Spells and Secrets character creator. Yeah, I don't think I would bother to make a character creator. Make a YouTube short around the character creator, because by the time somebody saw it, it would be too late anyways. The actual game Spells and Secret is already on the follow list. Heroes of Drakmeyer. The weird thing though is the fact that I'm not really doing anything for my YouTube channel, and that tends to be when my YouTube channel starts to succeed more, is the less I upload videos, the less I schedule videos, there's better reception by the YouTube algorithm, to the point where if I really had stopped making content after just like one major successful video, my channel may have been promoted even more because of that. Of course, that also means just stop playing video games, and I don't want to do that, and stop being a video game critic. A couple pinball games will give a chance to. Basically just saying yes to everything, unless I can immediately figure out a reason to say no. On top of needing to schedule things, I also have to slightly reprogram the scheduling macro to adjust for the new file name system, which sorts videos into a more chronological release order, giving me a better chance of having the newest released games promoted earlier, closer to the release, and later release games promoted later. Not really doing a great job at it, but it's the best I can really do. This Get Me Out Please catches my attention in just, I think, quite a bit. Like, it's a single player with online PvP, which co-op or online player versus player games are not something you really see a lot from what look like Japanese game developers or Japanese games. I wonder if maybe that's going to become more of a thing. See, I could see it being a case, and I'm not sure if this is really the feelings of Japanese gamers, but them spending so much time doing competition and being ranked by their class may find them in a situation that in their own entertainment that they don't want to be ranked and they don't want to compete, and that may lead to less of the competitive game succeeding. The path to Memento Mori, not to be confused with the Memento Mori mobile game I'm playing. Memento Mori, I think, just means remember sadness or something. I don't think it's Memento Morte, remember you will die, but maybe it is that. It's a famous Latin phrase. Should I say yes to this game? Not really. And let's see, we have yet another adult game called Dungeon Traveler. This time it looks to me like it's more cartoony Western animation of a witch and other characters, and I don't know what you're really doing here. It seems like you have a Tiny Tower style game from the looks of it, but maybe that's just the hub. the game is rated 83% positive with 12 reviewers already. It's early access. It's $8.99, English interface only. They're calling it a sandbox game. And it seems like you just kind of develop relationships with the other characters in the game in this hub. I don't know if you really build up the tower or the tavern anymore than a little bit. It has a day and night system, so it seems like you're probably limited in how many days you can interact with people, maybe play the game multiple times. It's a weirder one, certainly, because it actually feels like a game, and it actually takes half a second to do some research and figure out what the game actually is. I'm gonna say no to Cult of Personality. I think we'll say yes to this because the thumbnail here looks good enough, barely. Bugged out. Even if you hate bugs, I don't think you want to play a shooter where you're shooting bugs. So I'm going to say no to that. Of course, that's curating quite a bit on my own personal opinion. Time in Nasagi. Looks like might have been a 90s era visual novel. $11.99, Japanese full audio included. English and Chinese subtitles. Interesting. Yep. This is no adult content in this one, so it's either been censored or never was censored in the first place, or never needed to be censored in the first place. So I guess I'll make a YouTube short on that. Junkyard Fury looks like nothing. Really am spending a lot of time going through all the games though. And inherently that was what I thought might happen, is that we would start to spend too much time. There definitely was a point where it felt like every week or every day I streamed, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I was running into far too many games. This Infernal Masquerade, if it visually looked a little bit better, I would potentially give it a chance. Loading Life 2 looks interesting enough to say yes. Samsara Agent. I'm gonna say yes just because of positive review. Yep. Which inherently that does admit that early reviews will influence me. Whether they should or not. They probably shouldn't. Hidden object games. I could see going back on hidden object games and not really promoting them. I really haven't seen a lot of feedback for any of those, considering how many of those have had YouTube shorts made so far. This doesn't look like anything. Project Survivor. I'll give it a chance to. Just want to be done with it all. iAlly. It's like a slightly different style of hidden object games. I'm basically saying yes to way more things than I should. 5 Nights No Escape Co-op. So the VR game. Tribute to Five Nights at Freddy's. Which whatever. RPG Alchemy. Maybe. Yeah, we have one that's not in English, so I can say no to this. people would have said no to it anyways. And here we are back to another adult game, Hentai Midori, which may be from the same publisher of the other hentai game. Same concept. One girl, this time a lady with long green hair and big boobs, and several side puzzles showing her in several different positions. Selling for 69 cents. This time it says it supports English, French, Italian, and Spanish, and German as its top languages. Yep. Then we have a 3D CGI adult game called Return to Mia, which has a couple of 3D CGI ladies and one guy. Again, I imagine this is just a visual novel. There's some indication of some lesbianism happening, and boxing, and public sex in a ring, a boxing ring, and sex in a pool. So they're touching on several fetishes there. Massage. $13.49, English only in the interface and subtitles. No voice acting though. For that price, I kind of would expect there to be voice acting though. But otherwise it looks interesting enough. Here we have a dungeon crawler game called The Rings of Powder, not to be confused with The Rings of Power. Name confusion game. Then we have another hidden object game. I commissioned some frogs too, which I'm not going to promote. Then we have yet another adult game. Man, something has changed, definitely. This one's called Heavenly Beauty X Silver Bubble Ninetales. And it's not like these adult games would have been listed as non-adult games a couple weeks ago. They just wouldn't have existed. This game, unfortunately, looks pretty awful. Like an RPG Maker Survivors game, 8-bit Survivors game. It's $6.79, English, Japanese, and Chinese subtitles. But yeah, really no quality here worth mentioning. Let's see, we have Cosmos Delivery and Logistics, which looks like it's mostly a poker game simulator. Or cheating at poker game simulator. Lumens and Shades. Doesn't look polished enough to say yes to it. Suit or Soot. Doesn't look good enough. Mining Max. I'm gonna have to fall asleep as soon as I'm done streaming today. This is exactly what I don't want to have happen. Give this fairy teller more of a chance. Here's Rising. This is an interesting comic book art style that I've never really seen done well in video games, though. It could work, but somebody would have to do something fairly interesting with it, and I don't think this game is the game to do that. Here we have another adult game called Dream Girlfriend Doomer Girl. I wonder if they really are just forcing out all the adult games early to avoid Black Friday. Doomer Girl here is a short-haired black lady, tall, long, kind of goth in her dress, but not really that goth. And it looks more like a visual novel dating sim with just one focus on a character, which is kind of more of what I would like to see. It's $3.59. It's English and Russian. Weirdly, I would say, though, there's not actually anything too explicit in the screenshots, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's actually very little. I mean, I can just show it here. Wouldn't be surprised if there actually isn't but one or two adult scenes in the entire game, which could be a problem, certainly if that's what you're looking for. Conqueror Clown Noir looks weird enough to say yes to. think we'll say no to Cozy Village and anything named Cozy, more than likely. We can say no to this. We can say no to this. Yeah, at a certain level, to maintain momentum, I need the non-adult games to be closer to long lists of garbage games that can be easily dismissed. Once I start to have to look at things and look at screenshots and can't just dismiss it on the first screenshot or dismiss it on the title, that's tripling the amount of seconds from 1 second to 3 seconds per game. Here we have a Trolls game. I'm not sure if DreamWorks Trolls are still popular enough per game, but whatever. Sands of Aura is mostly positive. Is it out? Single player English? Do I want to put this on my wish list? I can't decide, so I'm going to leave it where it is. Should I make a new short around it? No, it's not visually interesting enough for that. First grade fantasy adventure doesn't look like anything of interest. Territory doesn't look good. We have another hidden object game. If anything, I could see myself sometimes highlighting hidden object games, but not doing it when there's a bunch of other games to make YouTube shorts around, like today. Yep. Just still trying to move as fast as possible. Thinking I'm going to say no to this game. There's some nice visuals on this, but then there's a lot of empty space too. I just don't think it's quite there. Yeah, whatever. I'll say yes. And we have Don't Scream. I could also see myself thinking that I'm just saying yes to more horror games because it's Halloween. Here we have Desktop Beach Girls, Bikini Girls, which, yep, not a lot there. Not really a game. Here we have something called Magic Bean, which is just a climbing, jumping game. It's not a terrible way to make a jumping game, but still just a jumping game. Madhouse Madness Prologue. I'm gonna say no to prologues. Dragot doesn't look interesting. Sudoku doesn't look interesting. Staring Contest. It's a interesting low effort game concept. Hopefully we don't see a whole bunch of them in the future. Starheim. And then, let's see, we've got a game called Marsh, which doesn't look like anything. And that brings us to the end of the show. And honestly, we only went 3 hours and 30 minutes, so really I was just tired to start off with. But there is also probably a bit of a difference when you're going through 50 games versus going through 75 games, even if you're speeding up to accomplish it. Anyways, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's a link down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.